Hello and welcome to the Answer Yes podcast. Thank you for tuning in. I've done over 300 interviews on this podcast channel, both for Liberty, for entrepreneurs, and some for Baja. And all of them have been great, and I've enjoyed all my guests. But I would say maybe 10 out of all these have been really meaningful to me. And today is one of those days. I've got Sheriff Lamb on the line today. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning to you, and thank you, Jim. I appreciate the kind words. I'm glad to be on, and I apologize it took so long to get on.
Well, I don't even want to say better late than never because you jumped right on it, and I really appreciate that. And the reason why this interview means so much to me is twofold. My dad was a sheriff in the 60s and 70s, and the service that you do, I understand it, I respect it, and we need more people like you. And I would say, second of all, the voice that you have in the community and in the United States, really that's resonating across the world, I respect that so much. I know it's hard to do, so thank you for both.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I see the uniform behind you. Is that your dad's?
Yeah, that's my dad's. Matter of fact, there's a ticket writing book. It says 5/19, 1969 on it.
Oh, that's cool.
My wife gave that to me a couple years ago for Christmas as a tribute. He's passed, and the 3030 up on the wall there was his as well. So he's alive and well in my office.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah. Hey, look, this show's about saying yes to opportunities in our lives, and we talk about the things that we've said yes to along the way to get where we're at today. And there's a lot of really big, important matters that I want to talk to you about that are common on your social media and your messaging. But I want to hear about a little bit of your whether it be your childhood or your early adulthood that made you want to become a sheriff and how you got to where you're at today. So if you can walk through that briefly, we'd appreciate it.
Well, and I love that mantra. I'm a big say yes to it. Like my terminology I typically use is screw it, let's do it. But I had never thought about being a cop. I was a business owner. My dad was a business owner. I don't come from a family of anybody who was in law enforcement. And so I just had my own business until one of my neighbors said, "Hey, do you want to go on a ride along?" And like you said, I said, "Yeah, I'll do it."
Mm-hmm.
So I went on this ride along, and that night we went on a call. It was on an Indian reservation, which is right next to Mesa, Tempe, and Scottsdale. So even though it's an Indian reservation, it's in the city.
Yeah.
And so I went on that ride along, and there was a call for a dad who had caught a 20-year-old with his 14-year-old daughter. They got into a little altercation. The kid runs out the back. And if you've been on a reservation, you'll have, and then you might have nothing behind it, and maybe in an abandoned travel trailer here in the desert. And so that's what we were out there in the desert looking, and I see this old abandoned travel trailer. I look in there, and amongst the clothes and debris inside there, I see what I think is like the core size of skin. And, I'm out there armed with a flashlight and courage is all. I don't have a gun. I don't have anything. And so I'm like, hey, I think the guy's in here. They jump in there. They pull him out, tase him, I think. And I came home that morning and I told my wife, I'm going to be a cop. I immediately said, yes, I'll put my application in. And I went to work on it. And so that was 33 years old when I did the ride along. I was in the academy at 34 years old. So that's how I got into it. I said, yes. Then, running for office, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say that almost seems unheard of to run, not run for office, but to become a sheriff in your 30s. I mean, most of us have figured it out and realized, hey, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, for me it was the opposite. I'm like, hey, I love this,
Mm-hmm.
And it was perfect for me because I was older. I had 5 kids. I was able to succeed in this profession, I think, large in part because I brought a whole different mindset to this job, and so I thought it was an advantage to me. I tend to look at life that way anyway. I look at everything as what is the advantage that I have here, even if it's good or bad. There's a poem by Rudyard Kipling, and I always quote it, but one of the parts of the poem, If, it says, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two imposters just the same. And it's true, like good things and bad things are both imposters in life. And when you start to see them as just life experiences and you I think it tends to sweeten life, and it makes you see things different, and how God is putting things in your place, and you're opening those doors so that you can say yes and go through those doors.
Yeah, well, God is definitely opening up doors for us and pushing us through at times. Clearly, you had to run for the office of sheriff. Go ahead and tell us about that as you started to a minute ago.
Yeah, I was a gang and drug detective. Had been gang and drug detective for a lot of years, and one day I didn't like the direction of the country. It was under President Obama. I thought we were going in the very wrong direction. I didn't want to be one of those guys that bitched about it but didn't do anything about it. And I felt like there was more that I could offer. Whether I was the greatest person for it, no, I didn't think that, but I was willing to say yes and try it. And
Hmm.
so I told my guys, I'm like, this was 2011. I said, you know what, I'm gonna run for sheriff. And they're like, you're crazy. I said, no, 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 I'm gonna do it. And they just dismissed it, like most people do.
Yeah.
And 6 months later, I'd put in my application here at Pinal County. I started making the changes, took a huge pay cut, left the reservation, came to Pinal County. Uh, we honestly, as a family, we sacrificed tremendously. People have no idea. They think just they see you in the sheriff's office and they think, well, that he was lucky. No, this was 2011 that I made that decision. We had a hard few years. It was during the downturn in the market that we did this. We had cars repossessed during that time. It was just not a great time, but we had that goal in mind of running for sheriff, and so we had to make a lot of sacrifices. Came to the county, worked here for a few years. I knew it was time to leave. Went out, had to start my own business again so that I could make enough money to run for sheriff. And finally, in 2015, we were at that point where we had to make a decision. And I said, I called my wife. I was working in Utah with my marketing company, and I called her and I said, look, I've been reading, different things about being a sheriff, and I think I'm just going to continue with the business, and maybe it's not right time right now for running for sheriff. And so we'll just look at it 4 years from now. And for the next 2 days, I couldn't shake the feeling. I
Hmm.
woke up and everything I could think of was about running for sheriff. And so I called her back like a day or two later, and I just said, screw it, let's do it. And here we are. I ran for sheriff. I knew nothing about politics, but I just felt like if I did the work, that everything would fall in line.
Yeah. It's interesting as citizens and non elected officials, we hear somebody say, I'm going to run for an office, and then poof, either they're in office or they're not, somebody else is. We don't realize the in between part. And I appreciate you being a little bit transparent about what your family went through and the struggles, because it not only does it take a commitment to raise your hand, but all of a sudden the attacks start coming, the finances start going out the window, and everything unravels. And clearly you got through that. I was going to ask, is it worth it? But I think I know the answer. But tell us, how you feel in the aftermath.
Well, yeah, it's worth it because I love this country. I love God, family, and freedom, and so yeah, it was worth it. I mean, but yeah, you're right. Uh, TJ Jakes, JD Jake, TD, I can't remember his name. TD Jakes. He says new levels bring on new devils, and that is no lie. Like whenever you try to bite off a little bit more, life has a way of testing your resolve and seeing what you're made of and whether you truly are committed to doing what you're going to do. Look, I got drugged through some things in that campaign, and since I've been sheriff, it's probably increased 100-fold of how difficult this job is, and so definitely not easy. I could talk to you for hours about all the things, and I'm usually pretty open about it. I write about some of it in my book, American Sheriff: Traditional Values in a Modern World. But we're just normal people trying to do great things. That's what my wife and I always say, normal people trying to do great things. And so, like, this was an opportunity, and no question, I would probably do it again. I know I said no question, but I would do it again. But man, knowing what I know now, would make that decision because you do get roughed up.
You've mentioned or referred to your wife a couple times now, and I'm certain that she's a big part of what you're doing. Do you want to talk about your relationship with her and how she's supported your efforts?
Oh yeah, there's no question. I couldn't do any of what I've done without the wife that I have. She's an amazing woman. She's super supportive. she's right there with me, riding shotgun when we go out and we decide to take on new adventures in life and challenge life. We're big believers in you challenge life. You've got to push life. We are every somebody in this world is blessed with different gifts and talents. We all have different fingerprints, different DNA. We have different irises. There's not a single person like you or I in the world, not a single person. And when you realize that, you realize that you've been blessed with something that you're supposed to share with this world. And my wife and I truly understand that. And we don't hold each other back either. She doesn't hold me back. I don't hold her authenticity back. And it makes for a good partnership. And, you know, we're at a stage in life. I was going to tell you earlier, one of the things that was very difficult is when we decided to run for sheriff, my kids were teenagers.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, it's taken its toll on my family as well and my kids. And I have great kids, but they feel the pressures of my decisions. They felt the pressures of those decisions. And same with my wife, you know, she feels those pressures. Fortunately now, my youngest is 19 today. It's his birthday.
All right.
And so I don't know when this will air, but he's 19 today, St. Patty's Day. I don't mean to date your show.
That's all right.
But you can cut that out if you need to. But he's 19 today, so it's made it a lot better because now my wife can travel with me. We can do a lot of things, and honestly, we have shared in some experiences that in this life most people are not able to experience, and so we cherish each one of those as a blessing and as something that we're very grateful that we've been blessed to be able to experience some of these things.
You know, I want to bring up real briefly about the family and politics. I'm on the school board, elected back in May. My wife is running for precinct captain for the Republican Party as of last week. We share calls, which I'm sure you do the same. She called me yesterday. She says, honey, I just want you to know they're accusing us of embezzling money through our political action committee and stealing from candidates. I said, that's wonderful. I mean, you know, the attacks just come in. Like you said, the devil's out there against us.
It is. They've attacked me at every angle. They've said things about me. But you know what it does for me, though? It really, for example, whatever the media says, I just don't trust because I've been the victim of the media's lies. I know what the truth is. And I've just watched people push this narrative out there. And I'm like, those are lies. And so now when the media says something, I'm like, they're probably lies. And like, for example, if they were to say something about you, Jim, unless I saw it with my own two eyes, I just don't believe anything I see anymore. And frankly, I let people live their own lives anyway. I don't bother them. Like if you want to, whatever you decide to do in your life, that's your choice. I'm here to live my life. You're here to live yours. And what I do is I fight for your freedom to be able to live the life you want to live.
Yeah, I think people miss that. I've got a series of small questions for you, and this kind of leads into one of them, and that is, when does common sense kick in, not only locally, but for this country? Because I think we've lost all sense of common sense.
Well, that's a question because I think I don't know that common sense is going to kick in because you have to have it for it to kick in. So we've got to gain some common sense is really what we need in this society. I can only control what I can control. And so what I try to do is try to be a beacon of hope. I try to be a beacon of truth. I try to be a beacon of common sense. And hopefully other people feel energized and will hopefully follow that lead and start to have more common sense approach. Now, I will tell you that the fires that these politicians and mainstream media continue to set throughout not only America, but throughout the world, I think that those issues, inflation, gas prices, war, open borders, drugs coming into our communities, all of these failures with this current administration and politics on a global scale, I think are starting to instill common sense back in the people. And the problem is this generation was raised very soft, and this generation has had everything at their fingertips.